state-sponsored school prayer. Number two, the secular left declared a war on marriage, which weakened women and opened the door for a culture of meaninglessness. Homosexuality is dividing us and bringing hostility in the public square. The answer to that is all sexual behavior is private behavior. It's adult behavior. Keep it in the bedroom. But yet we've allowed for this to come out into our major society, and we have record numbers of people now that are either in their own tragedies because of the HIV/AIDS virus, and or as a society, we're moving toward this type of meaninglessness that's hurting us. Abortion has also hurt us. I mentioned the 55 million that are now killed. And when you get to the point as a country that you can't even take away $350 million from a major corporation, this is corporate welfare, Planned Parenthood. They're a $1 billion corporation, and we can't even get $350 million away from them. There's really a challenge for us. Every 94 seconds, Planned Parenthood kills a child. Every 94 seconds, the American taxpayers give them $1,600. In 1960, 75% of American adults were married compared to 50% today. In 1960, 45% of our young adults between 18 and 24 were married compared to 9% today. Today, while 1 in 4 American women never married and just under 50% are currently married, 4 in 10 American births are outside of marriage. In 1980, when Ronald Reagan was president, 18% of all births were outside marriage compared to 43% today. Do you really think that we should only focus on the economic challenges that are confronting our country? 1.7 million in 2011 alone. Blacks went from 22% in the 60s out of wedlock birth rates to 72% today. That's the result of liberalism and their social engineering. Whites went from 3% in the 60s to 30% today. Hispanics, well, there was no data in the 60s because it's a made-up political term, so we didn't separate out down to the, exactly how many ethnicities are you in, have you in you, so that we can, come up with some special interest program for you. We weren't doing that then. But today we certainly are keeping track, and their out-of-wedlock birth rate is 53%. In fact, the top 3 social crises confronting us as a country are rooted in sexual matters: AIDS, abortion, and the entire welfare state. The third area where they declared war on us was the war on poverty, which has weakened family and opened this door for this culture of entitlement. And now it's spilled out everywhere, this culture of entitlement. The Great Society has had great costs. In just 50 years, blacks went from 70% of children being raised in married households to 70% of children being raised now in single-parent households. You want to see where America's going? We're riding right behind where the black community went. They were most vulnerable when they started this social engineering, and they're just a little bit ahead of the rest of the society if we don't put a stop on it. So if we really want to get down to what's sick in our society and do something about it and see what role women can play, we need to take a look at some of this data, because mountains of data point to the connection between religion and traditional marriage to civil order, protection of private property, and economic prosperity. If we want to build a nation of free people, we want to build a nation of prosperous people economically, then we've got to build a nation of responsible people once again. And no one can talk about these matters like women. I see nowhere in the Declaration of Independence that politicians have a right to force me to pay for my neighbor's lifestyle, not their housing, their food, their child care, their habits, especially not their sexual habits. This whole idea of redistribution of wealth, it's inconsistent with the founding of this country. We're founded in freedom and personal responsibility. But it's also inconsistent with the scripture for people that are Christians in the room. This idea of redistribution, socialism, it's motivated by envy, but it's inconsistent with the 10th commandment. The 10th commandment says, do not covet. And socialism is covetousness. Somebody has something somebody else doesn't have, so we go hire politicians to take it from them. So now we violate the 8th commandment because they're stealing some of this money, because the IRS doesn't send letters out to the wealthy in our society and say, how would you like to benevolently give to this poverty program so that Star Parker can waste away her life out of Venice Beach and getting high? No, what they do is they threaten them that we're going to pass a law and take your money, and if you object to it or you don't send it to us, we're going to take you to jail. I see nowhere in the Constitution that a politician has a right to force religious individuals or religious institutions to subsidize activities, behaviors, or life choices that they consider abhorrent or in violating the tenets of their faith. This battle against Obamacare is still raging. Just because he won the election and had a Supreme Court decision did not take away our fight and our ability to fight, and we should have the desire to fight. This HHS mandate for these sex subsidies, it's one that has to be fought for all that believe that there are boundaries set in our Constitution that politicians can't cross. This is not just about the Catholic Church. These are boundaries that were set by our nation's founders so that our country would be free. Boundaries that they themselves were forced to debate for 80 years regarding slavery, because freedom and the ideals of personal liberty that they themselves declared conflicted with the very laws of the very land that they themselves established. And this HHS mandate has made Sandra Fluke a national icon for sexual promiscuity. But I've got news for Miss Fluke, and we all should have news for Miss Fluke. This is an area that women can take on Miss Fluke. That no more than should her auto insurance pay for my tune-ups, then should my health insurance pay for her sex life. Not her Viagra, not her condoms, not her birth control, and certainly not her abortion. We're no longer a free country when a politician can force Americans to subsidize what their faith deems vile and destructive. We're no longer a nation of individual obligation when politicians can pit family against family, friend against friend, neighbor against neighbor, employer against employer, the young against the old. I mean, my goodness, these social engineering on the left have created a war on us that we can't even go into our own families anymore and have a sit down. I was confronted at my mom's funeral over my political views. The only way that we're going to reverse this trend is if we limit the role of government in all of our lives. So the first question we should be asking ourselves is not how we're going to elect more Republicans or how we're going to go out there and spread our message so that we can get more people interested in the Republican Party. No, the first question that we should be asking ourselves is what's wrong with our country? And the answer we should be seeking is how do we begin to fix what's wrong locally? And what's wrong with our country is we're not building according to the blueprints anymore. Our nation was designed to be free under God, and we've lost our way. Every part of our country that's untouched by government is going great. I mean, look at this little iPad. This is unbelievable. American innovation and productivity, where people are still free, is absolutely amazing. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I was back home, maybe a month ago, I don't know. I try to get home at least once a month now. But I was home and I just happened to be down at the water, and my little BlackBerry fell into the water and in the ocean down there somewhere. And at least down in Dana Point, though, they have this little water sweep. They go down in the bottom of the ocean a couple of times a year and bring up everything that they found. And somebody actually gets a prize for the most unique thing that they found. So I'm praying that my BlackBerry, like my little black book, just everything got erased down there. But immediately I knew I needed everything in it. I'm like, my calendar, I didn't back up. I never back up. So I got talked into by my daughter this this iPhone, because she said, Mom, you won't ever have to worry about that again. Every time you put something in your iPhone, it just automatically goes to your iPad. Everywhere that we see freedom in our country, we're still working. It's still working very, very well. Our problem is that we've let government take over too much of our lives. The federal government now takes 25% of the American economy. Out of control debt, enslavement to government, and broken families is no formula for a great country. But the good news is that we can change. And we women, we can and we should be at the forefront of these changes. Women can help this country by no longer first ignoring the culture war. American society today is in moral relativism, it's in sexual recklessness, and it's in economic envy. And women can speak to these things with great zeal and with passion, personal passion, because it touches every single one of our lives. Conservative women can also help build allies that have been long ignored by Republicans in our communities hardest hit in neighborhoods, hit by liberalism, because we have children, and children play together regardless of ethnicity until someone tells them not to. If our children begin to play together, then we can get messages into our hardest hit communities, and getting a message of freedom into these ethnic communities should be the top priority for conservatives. This country is becoming less white, yet liberalism is the only message that has been sold in our minority communities for 50 years. And these communities are not only growing, they're becoming much more ethnically diverse. I was on a plane from North Carolina going up to Ohio, and people on the plane, all the American whites were just kind of in uproar a little bit because it was very difficult for us to get on a plane because it wasn't Southwest. They assigned us a seat, and we get on there, we're in the seat assignment, and all the plane people were sitting in your seat. And so I got on, my seat was seat 1A, and somebody was sitting in my seat too, because they're all mumbling. So I ended up on the back seat at the next to the restroom in the way back, with the only one on the plane that spoke English. The reason they were all in the wrong seats is because none of them spoke English, and he spoke English. And so I asked them where they were from, and they were from a country called Bhutan that's no longer in existence. They moved them into Nepal, and now they're moving them into our country. To the State Park. There's 50,000 of them. There's no more, and they're moving them in, and they were moving them up to Ohio. We began to talk about this socialistic country that they came from, and he said one of the reasons that they gripped us and what they were fascinated about, and he just kept staring out a window, and they were all just chattering in their language. They were fascinated that America was so beautiful. Just in the little flight we were taking from North Carolina to Ohio, and the reason is because how they kept them blind and accepting that minimal little type of life under communism was because they told them that American capitalism is so cruel that we have no trees. And so when they flew into New York, and it was night, and then they flew down to North Carolina, and they housed them there. So this was the first time they got up and they saw we have trees. And the hand of the Lord is so gracious that what other state? I mean, if you've ever been to North Carolina, you see they have a lot of trees. So I kept showing them trees all the way up. We have trees. Capitalism's wonderful. You can be anything you want to be. He said, he was a teacher in Bhutan. He said, I don't know that I can teach. He's willing to do any job. I said, you can be anything you want to here. You can be a doctor. You can be a lawyer. I said, you can even be a bum. He said, what's a bum? I said, never mind. We really have enough of those. We're becoming much more diverse as a community of people. So conservatives, if we don't reach in these communities, we're just going to not be the America that we all love. Conservatives are not going to be able to move this nation toward building according to the constitutional blueprints. We are not going to be able to get elected. When Ronald Reagan was elected, 88% of the electorate was white. In 2008, 74% electorate was white. In 2010, the census showed that this trend was continuing. More than 50% of all new American births are non-white. The fact of the matter is that without blacks and Hispanics understanding American exceptionalism, it's going to get harder for us to elect conservatives, because the messaging into these other diverse communities that are coming into our country looking for freedom, their message is now coming from these blacks and Latinos. And the blacks and Latinos messages are coming from the hard left, because that's all they hear in their communities. And without blacks and Hispanics, it's going to even get harder for the conservatives that we do get elected to get the reforms that we need. And the great irony is that the reforms that we as conservatives desired are reforms that low-income Americans need more than anyone. They need help to get their children out of these broken schools. They need help more than anyone to get from under these broken healthcare policies, broken housing policies, broken retirement policies, and the broken welfare policies. Their communities are overrun by this madness, and they're choking. All we get is a message from their leaders that want to keep them enslaved to this government poverty plantation. But when you get in these communities, they know the reality. It is not pleasant to live in a housing project and cross your fingers and hope your child makes it to school, has a book at that school, and then cross your fingers that they come back. My organization right now is very heavily involved in this gun control debate. I have to remind my Senator Dianne Feinstein that every inner city in this country is already a gun-free zone for the law-abiding. And what we've done is we have equipped the ill-intended few to take over these communities to where people have no safety whatsoever. I also reminded her, which she didn't like, I don't think, that this is the first time America has had gun control. And what we had to remind them of is the time that we had the KKK running all through this country, and they kept blacks from being able to have arms because of black codes and Jim Crow laws. And then we remind them with a little lynching that because of their hearings yesterday that gun control is unacceptable in America. These folks in these hard-hit communities need to understand, more than anyone, our founding principles of traditional values, limited government, and free markets. They need to understand that these principles are of their interest, and why our money says e pluribus unum, many become one. One of the biggest tragedies to our unity right now as a nation is that we've allowed this messaging of multiculturalism and diversity to go on for too long. And now people really believe it. We had some pastors come up. My group works closely with a pastor network we're building all across the country because everyone has a vow to bail. You know, in fact, we looked at the data, and out of the 45,000 black churches in the country, about 10% are on our side. A third of blacks still poll that they're evangelical and conservative. And while we're crying that 96% of blacks vote for President Obama, we forgot that 4% voted with us. That's 800,000. Where are they? Who are they? Let's round them up and get them to bring one more. We only need a 3% bump when we won Ohio under President Bush. We need to change our thinking. We've been convinced that we are losing. We're not losing. How do we have 30 governors and 24 state legislatures and governors? We can do amazing things. Americans aren't rejecting conservatism. They're looking at that Republican brand that the left has convinced them is a nasty word, so they won't themselves admit that they might be one of us. Well, our group looked at the 20% of blacks that didn't show up at all. This was supposed to be an election year. I'm talking 2008 now. To be able to be a part of history, to elect America's first black president. And African-American registered voters in large numbers didn't even show up. These are those evangelical and conservatives. And the reason I'm telling you that is because we bring pastors to Washington once a year. And our most recent one, we were able to get tickets to get into the Capitol. So we took our pastors to the Capitol. And now when you go to the Capitol tour, they make you sit through this little movie, like a little video movie to learn about our founding principles. And much of the chatter coming up out of there is because they reminded us about e pluribus unum in that little movie. Many become one. And we had pastors of large churches across this country say, I never heard that term before. We have a lot of work to do. Well, where would they? How would they? The government controls all of their education, and we've never sent messages otherwise into these communities. If somebody tells you that that's blue all your life and you never heard of another color, you really think it's blue. And then somebody tells you that's not blue, that's green. You idiot. Well, you just called their mama an idiot because her mama's the one that told them it was blue. That's how we message. What's wrong with you that you would actually be a part of that party? Well, I'm a part of that party because my mama was a part of that party. What's wrong with you? We forgot a basic marketing when it comes to our principles and our ideas, as if we're afraid of them. Right now, only all that blacks hear from and Hispanics is from liberals. Left-wing minority organizations like the NAACP and La Raza, they get hundreds of millions of dollars in funding from left-wing foundations and unprincipled American corporations that just pump liberal lies into these communities. There's a whole lot of just payola. These American companies now are just so unprincipled that they just don't want to be bothered much, just like give them the money. When Jesse Jackson went after Toyota a few years back and called them racist, they tried for all of a minute to fight that off. And next thing you know, they paid them off $450 million. So they turned their eye on Nissan. And Nissan didn't even bother to take a minute. They just said, how much? And it was like an undisclosed amount for a few years. And then finally we got in that record and found out that it was $650 million. Minority children have for 3 generations been indoctrinated with left-wing lies in left-wing government-controlled cesspools we call schools. And minority adults, they get their news from ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, BET, Univision. They're celebrities and they're comedians, which is why us conservatives, if we're really wanting to do this work, we have to build competing media voices and work with churches to open schools, so to build an underground megaphone for truth. Folks who care about the future of this great country of ours that we are losing need to understand that we've got to start making the investments into these ethnic communities. We ought to think about our children and our grandchildren. This is more than just professional for me now. It's really personal. I told you a little bit about my history, going through all of that tragedy and going through all of those abortions. God bless my life. I work with women all over this country in crisis pregnancy centers, and post-abortive ministry work is the largest part of that work right now, because women do regret their abortions later on in life as they age. And I know a lot of women who never had an opportunity to even give birth. And I birthed after that. And I don't birth once, I birthed 2. One of them I got to keep 14 years. The other I got to marry off. And now she has 2 children. My 2 little grandchildren. My Mr. James, he's 7 years old. He's at Catholic school now because when he was 2, I taught him how to draw on the walls, and when he was 4, I taught him to tell his dad he didn't need a bedtime, and he just started growing into all of that. So yeah, he gets his first communion in a few weeks. And he kind of likes that bow in your knee thing, so I'm kind of glad he does, because he needed a little bit of discipline. But Miss Naomi, oh my, I'm going to visit her in about 3 weeks. She's turning 1 year old. And I know I saw her little first crawl on the little Skypey thing, so I had to run all the way back just to see it in person. And I tell you, she is so deserving of a Neiman Marcus card. I'm going to get her one for her birthday. I am. I'm going to send a bill to her parents, though. But we've got to think about our children and our grandchildren. What kind of world are they going to be living in if we keep letting this go on? I'm not telling you the work is going to be simple, but I am telling you that if we do the work, we could really benefit, not just for ourselves and our families, but for our country and then for the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Star, I'm going to ask you to come right back up on the stage with me for the first panel. You have obviously met Star Parker now, but my name is Tina Zarishin. I'm a research associate at the Oklahoma Council of